Hi, welcome back to Rebel Movement Podcast. My name is Billy. My pronouns are they, them, or she, her. However, they, them feels especially good. She, her is still fine. I'm really excited you're here. I'm doing something a little bit different for the August episodes. I know that if you've been around for a while, you may have noticed a pattern. Every fifth episode was just myself, and the other four or whatever would be interviews with other folks. And I've absolutely loved the interviews. If you haven't listened to them all yet, honestly, go and listen to them because oh my gosh, I feel so lucky that I'm able to talk to every single person that came and talked with me. I learned so much from the episode. Like, it felt a little bit self-serving. Like, I just wanted to have these conversations. Obviously, I also wanted to share them with the world and I wanted you to hear them. But each time I was like, "Ooh, this is such a good, like, I don't know if nourishing conversation makes sense, where it just like felt good for me to have it." So go listen to those if you haven't already. I love them. For August, I'm just going to be doing episodes with me. However, they're all going to be around kind of a slightly different topic than we normally do. I haven't planned them all out yet, but I think they will be. Last week, we did advice I would give myself when I first started to teach. Um, and this week, we're going to talk about how to teach movement online and what that was like. This might be something that's definitely more talked about now, especially post pandemic. But when I did my teacher training, it was not something that we talked about um, at all, I don't think. And I don't know if it's still a piece missing from trainings, or if you've been teaching for a while or you work with people online, it can just be like tricky to figure out. And then also transitioning to in person after the pandemic. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about all of that stuff. Um, and then yeah, I got some more goodies for you next week. If you're not a movement teacher, you'll still get a lot of stuff from this episode. I think it can be translated to like being a student in these places, in these rooms, or other places where you might have to host, say, like a training or a workshop or a work meeting or a hangout online. Um, but this is especially for my fellow movement teachers or business owners that have an online or want to have an online space. Um, what is the other stuff I want to give you updates for? Ooh, I'll give you some personal updates first. It might be different when this episode comes out. But currently, in terms of the renovations going on for me, short version is we're renovating half the house of my partner's parents' house, making it a duplex. Um, we've been doing this for quite a number of months now, but now we have a functional bathroom and a functional kitchen sink, and almost all the walls are done, which feels like a really big deal. um, it's so cool, and almost all the electrical is done. That's pretty cool. I'm quite excited about it. We still have quite a bit to go, but it feels like a huge difference. And I think now is some of the stuff that I might be able to do even more myself. I mean, like, I can't figure out how to straighten a wall. I could figure it out. It's not going to be my area of expertise. However, I could probably teach myself how to like build a closet. So maybe I'm just tooting my own horn here for skills that I don't have yet, but I'll let you know. I'll keep you updated. I have learned how to do drywall, how to mud, how to tape, not like tape drywall, I mean, so it all kind of goes together. Um, and how to rip up floors, how to do ombre painting walls and striped walls painting, and a lot of planning. A lot of planning. And I am the person that I did love Sims growing up. Absolutely loved building houses in Sims. Didn't really care about playing the actual people's lives through, but I love designing houses. It is similar in person. However, it's much more brain work, especially because you have to think about like, where is the outlet going to go? What are you going to use this outlet for? Therefore, like, how far out from the wall should you put it? Especially because like everything in this is like very custom designed and built. So I'm not trying to complain. It's lovely and I'm very lucky, but it's a certain type of tiredness in my brain that I get after having to plan all of this stuff for so long. In terms of other updates, oh, I have a garden now. Have I told you that recently? Um, I planted different like sweet potatoes, regular potatoes, marigolds because they help, I guess, help with pests. They're also pretty. Tomatoes, carrots, beets, not beets, radishes, which I don't even really like, but my partner likes them. Pumpkins, cucumbers, zucchinis, watermelon, and oh, snap peas. So far, we've just gotten cherry tomatoes, a couple of snap peas, and zucchinis, but we have some baby watermelons, which is pretty exciting, and some baby cucumbers. And I planted sunflowers twice. The first time I put down like a fair amount of seeds, like I don't know, quite a lot of them. Nothing happened. Second time I put down even more, like probably like I don't know, 50 seeds, maybe dramatic, but I put down tons of seeds. And there's four coming up for some reason. This past weekend I was away and I came back and my partner sent me a picture. There's a sunflower growing in the garden that's like 4 feet away from where the sunflowers were planted. So my suspicion is the birds came and tried to eat the sunflower seeds and dropped one. But it's pretty tall, so it must have been for my first planting of them, sowing of them. And then my other exciting update for you, which maybe you don't care as much about this stuff, but I do, so I'm going to tell you anyway. I have 4 baby watermelons. They're like sugar baby watermelons, so they only get to be like 8 inches, but these little babies are like the size of an orange, and I am like particularly excited about those. Honestly, for a bit there, I thought that nothing was going to work. My very first time having a garden. Um, Granted, I have like I'm living with 2 experts for gardening. So, um, and I have a friend, my friend Shannon Crow, and I talk about gardening stuff quite a bit. And I have lots of support basically for this. But there was definitely a few times where I was like, oh, maybe this isn't going to work. Like maybe whatever. But you know what? It's been fine. I've learned a lot from it. And um, there's actually nothing. It feels so satisfying, even if it's so far, it's just been like a handful, like 4 or 5 cherry tomatoes and like 3 snap peas. But there is nothing like bringing that in and be like, I grew this. I fucking grew these vegetables. I'm keeping track of the amount of stuff that we harvest. And I'll keep maybe at the end of the summer, it'll be fun. I'll update you with how much I got because it's fun and it's relevant to my life. But that's been really fun. Odin, the dog that I live with, my partner's parents' dog, has been to say a big supporter. I'm going to say more so. He really likes to eat the tomatoes off the vine. So he's just there for the smell and to check in with the tomatoes. He had his own tomato plant, which probably had about 5 or 6 cherry tomatoes on them, but he ate them extremely carefully. He's this old 16-year-old cute dog. And yeah, he's so gentle with it. He takes like the teeniest little bite and then takes a couple of steps back. And he ate even the green ones, which might not have tasted that good, but he did not seem to be unhappy about it. That's all my personal updates, I think. I may have more, but those are the most exciting ones to me. Although I do have a really exciting invitation is that in September, I'm hosting a virtual teacher workshop. And it's particularly made for movement teachers, yoga teachers, fitness teachers, coaches, whatever. However, you don't necessarily have to be a teacher in order to take it. So it's called Anti-Diet Teaching. It's September 20th, 10 a.m. Eastern till about 4 p.m. Eastern with a 1-hour lunch break. And we're going to cover what diet culture is, diet culture's problematic history, how it affects you and your students. We're going to cover internal fat bias or internal anti-fat bias, how to recognize how anti-fat bias affects you and your teaching, and then teaching in a more inclusive way. So it's going to involve practices so we can go through examples. We'll have stuff that you can practice teaching with and all sorts of different parts of it. So it's not just the whole time it being a lecture. As I said, it's online. The recording is available, and you actually are eligible to get continuing education hours via Yoga Alliance. So I'm now certified as a Yoga Alliance continuing education provider. So you get 5 hours of continuing education if you are Yoga Alliance certified. So as I said, this is specifically made for yoga teachers, personal trainers, group fitness instructors, any kind of movement teacher. However, if you're a coach of a different type, maybe you're like a life coach or you work with people, basically, this still can apply to you. You can still learn a lot from it. If you sign up as a non-movement teacher, just send me a little note and say what your profession is. Just tell me a little bit about it. So then if we have more for any of the interactive stuff or any of the kind of examples, I can also include examples that will be more relevant to you in your life. So you'll get even more from the training. And this training is $200 Canadian. There is an option for a payment plan, as well as sliding scale pricing and scholarship pricing. If you are interested in this, alternative times of this, or future stuff, sign up for my newsletter. There's a link on my page. If you have any questions about it, send me a note, info@movewithbilly.com. And make sure you join as soon as possible because I'm really limiting the spaces for this one. And I'll have more in the summer. Or no, in the fall, in the winter. In the winter, in January. Different workshop, but I'm going to keep that one a secret and make you wait. So today, I'm going to talk a little bit about teaching online. And I'm going to thank you for your patience. I know we had a longer intro today, but I mean, it's so fun to talk about the personal stuff, and we haven't done that much lately. Plus, I have so many garden updates to give you. So, okay. When I first started teaching, and for the first, I don't know how many years, 4, maybe, I've been teaching for almost 8 years now, which is a little bit wild to think about. I definitely started teaching in person. I was actually teaching in a hot yoga studio, and that was most of my experience. But so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my history with teaching. Then we'll talk about transitioning to teaching online and just kind of any kind of transition stuff which might be relevant to the conversation. All right, so let's talk about my experience. I did my first Hatha 500-hour training in 2016. After that, I did a yoga and massage training, which is very much hands-on stuff in like a restorative class. I did a vinyasa or a flow training after that. I did a fitness teaching fitness workout class. How do I even say those words? Workout/group fitness class training. There we go. I then did one called Reaching In, Reaching Out, which is not, I don't think it exists anymore. But it was a 75-hour inclusivity, anti-racism, queer inclusive, and trauma-informed training. I did another training on inclusivity after that. I did some workshops with Yoga Detour, which talks about sort of the more functionality points of movement in yoga. I did another one called Unlearning Yoga Postures, where again, we're talking about a lot of the functionality movement, like mobility stuff. This person who ran this is a physiotherapist. I did mental health first aid training. I did trans affirming yoga. I'm in the middle, maybe I'll be done at this point, of pre and post natal coaching and yoga for spoonies, which I am almost done this one. It's one via accessible yoga, and if you're interested in those, I'm going to put that all on my website. I'm not currently, when I recorded this, the yoga for spoonies one doesn't have each module in there, but I might actually change it to include that because each module is different for obviously a different subject, and they're all really good. So yeah, that's my like run through experience. I will Okay, got myself confused. When I first started teaching, I was teaching in person, and hands-on was definitely a thing that I was taught to do, very differently than some other teachers that I've met. When I was doing training, there was a lot of talk. It was honestly pretty good. It was really good. For the most part, really good training. There was a lot of talk about the intentionality behind hands-on adjustments. Like, why are you doing this? What are you hoping to achieve? And my stance on hands-on is a little bit changed, but still will come down to this of like, you're not ever pushing someone's body deeper into the posture. That part stays the same. You're not ever pushing someone's body deeper into the posture. That's a decision they should be able to make, the student. They should make for their own body. We don't do that. If you're wanting to bring awareness to someone's alignment, you don't need to use your hands for that. And if you have permission, if you've done all that, then you can use a simple like poke knee and then point to the right. I don't know. But you're not ever moving someone's body in a posture like that as a general rule. And then you might sometimes do something like massage type of, or like restorative things, or like a simple hand on their back kind of thing sometimes. But those are sort of more so the hands-on adjustments that I did. And sometimes there's one that I used to do where which I was taught to do if you're in like Warrior 2, if I come up and stand towards your back foot and just stand my foot right next to your foot, which just kind of adds a little bit of stability. However, I don't do hands-on anymore. I teach online, but when I do teach in person, it would take me, like, I would need to have had conversations with my students first. It would be more so, I would ask permission each time, and it would not be with people I don't know. And there would have to be like, you know, a lot of consent and a lot of conversation around what might or might not feel comforting for you or good for you. That's one of the things that I think has changed a lot, thankfully, the past, I don't know, 4 years, or at least I've seen a lot more conversation about it. And it is, I think, really important because the conversation around consent definitely needs to happen in these spaces. And there is the point that sometimes if you ask just one time, people's consent can change. They can change their mind. They might not feel comfortable with hands-on in one posture, but they might feel comfortable with hands-on in another posture. If you are in a space where you do hands-on, just checking in each time you do and watching out for any other body signs. Like, I've heard of an example where someone once asked the student, like, I'm going to put my hands on your back, for example, in a child's pose. Is that okay? And they say yes, but then the teacher senses the student's body like really, like almost like kick you away, like really tense up and not, clearly it's not comfortable. In that case, like, the body's not ready, but maybe even though their mind might be ready. So just like paying attention, but especially having those conversations, um, and really underlining that you're not pushing someone's body further into the posture. You can have a conversation about alignment, and you can have a conversation where you're bringing their awareness to their body, but it is when you're pushing someone's body into a posture, that's where injuries will happen. Super important not to do it. Okay. I know I like emphasize that, but the stories I've heard, oh my God, gross stories. I will not repeat them. No, not like people pushing on knees in butterfly pose or cobbler's pose and there being like a crack. Ugh, don't do it. Don't do it. Okay. Now that my tangent's done and my PSA is out there, when we first started teaching online, so I was in a studio where you would walk around the room when you're teaching, and you would not practice while teaching, which I did like, because then you can be really in tune with the bodies in the room and you can really notice things and cue for the people in the room. And you can hear breath in the room. But when you go to teach online, it's a totally different thing. And it's a totally different approach to movement. So here are my tips. If you're wanting to teach online, I will give you tips for how to set that up, in terms of technology wise. But in terms of actually teaching, I would say do the practice for the most part. At least if there's new people in the room with you, do the practice if you can. If you're a person who can't do the practice for any reason, then just communicate that with your students. And really have there be a space where they can let you know if they don't understand the posture. Um, if you, so I guess I'm not really saying you have to do the practice. So I guess, okay, we'll restructure it. There's a couple of approaches. The first one is you could do the practice, and um, when you do the practice, check in that you're not always doing the hardest version of the postures. I think this should be the case anyway, but you can for sure demo the versions, but try to come to the more gentle version of the posture. That way people don't have to ask. And also, it's just going to create a little bit more of a safe feeling space. Um, if you're doing one-on-one, that's more so the space that you might be able to give even more instruction for their particular alignment. But I think that online gives us this really cool opportunity to focus more, excuse me, on bringing their awareness to their bodies, which is going to have a bigger impact. So having them notice, like, so we'll use Warrior 2, for example, like whether they close their eyes or turn their gaze down, whatever, they bring awareness into their body. And how do their hips feel? How does your back feel? And if there's any wonkiness, play with moving where your arms are, for example. So rather than reaching forward and back, exactly over top of your feet, maybe you do slightly off and you go a little to the right or whatever. How does that feel? Or if you're doing a powerful pose or squats, have it be like a bit of an experiment where you're saying, like, okay, your knees are going to point in the same direction as your toes. Try bringing your feet a little closer together. Squat here. Now try bringing your feet a little further apart. Try a squat here. Now what happens if you bring your toes point out and your knees also go out in that same direction? It's like you're gathering information. That can have even more impact than you specifically talking about their like one person's alignment. Does that make sense? Like if they can learn what their experience is like in a posture and learn to make decisions based off of that, so fucking cool. That's a really big thing for them to be learning. They might learn that when they're in Warrior 2, they have to back pain, and you're giving them a tool to then change that experience. You know what I mean? You always want to make sure whether you're doing the postures or you're just teaching them, like just speaking to them, just make sure that there is a space for them to ask you questions after. They could send you an email or a message for sure, just like make that invitation, or maybe you stick around for a minute. What I do in my classes is at the very beginning, I have space to chat, check in, have them share wins if they want to, or ask questions, or have like the community piece. And I found it's made a really big difference in the feeling of the classes. Because I think one of the things that can be missing sometimes from the online space is the community aspect. One thing you get when you're going into in-person classes is that like meeting other people in the community and like having that conversation with the teacher. And when there's no conversation, it can feel a little bit like, like you're missing that part of it, which makes sense. It totally makes sense. You don't have to do it the way I do it, of course, but that's one of the things that I absolutely love about the way that I do it is I have this opportunity to check in with people and to ask them how they are and see what's going on with them. And then I will sometimes ask if there's any requests because there is which there's not, and that's fine, but sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, my back has been so sore. And sometimes it's when one person says, like, makes a request that the other person then is like, you know what, yeah, actually this part's sore too, I love this. um it's like another little way of connecting, which is like a no pressure connect. So let's recap. First is I'd like just change potentially being open to changing how you're teaching. So maybe that means you're doing all the postures now. Maybe you're talking through it really differently. And you're, rather than going around to each person and correcting their posture, you're inviting them to check in with how they feel in their bodies and making the change based off of that. That's the biggest one. underline that a bunch, because sometimes you will be teaching and everyone will have their camera off. And that's fine, right? It's totally fine. It is a bit of an adjustment. As a teacher, it can feel a little bit strange the first couple times if you're teaching and there's like you can't hear any breath and you can't see anybody. So you're like, is anybody really there? They are. Trust that they are. But it helps. Excuse me. I don't know if that was a hiccup or a burp. But it helps like tremendously if you change the approach. If your teaching is no longer based on everyone's posture having to look a certain way and it's really based on how they feel in their bodies. I really like to remind people that they can take rest anytime, they can walk away and come back anytime. They can ask questions. I also like to give a couple of options in each practice or in each posture and kind of put in there. I mean, I don't always do this for every single one, especially if people are in my class and they are in it every week and they know all the options. But one thing I will address sometimes is if someone's worried that they're not going to be doing it right, is remind them that, like, really at the end of the day, their experience in their body is the best thing. And if they're doing something completely different than what I'm teaching, like say I'm teaching a flow class and they're just doing a restorative practice, like that's awesome. We're still practicing together and they're listening to their bodies. I've had people like get up and do a little dance, tiny little dance break and then come back to practice. Like I love the space that you're able, like a space where you're able to just like actually really honor what comes up in your body and it's safe. Um, I do generally, I don't really ask it, but my students usually will have mic and camera on at the beginning when we're doing a chat and then off when I go to record the class. I don't record the chatting at the beginning because it's more personal and that's you're not going to get as much out of it if you're listening to the recording of that part. So that part's not recorded. People generally have their camera and mic on, but you don't have to. Like I've had people have their camera off or they send in a little chat instead of using their voice, or maybe they just watch and that's always fine. And I do, as I said, I record the class so that I can send it out if anyone can't make it or if you wanted to use it for other stuff. If you use anyone's names in the recording, you can't then sell it. I would say that's just a personal ethics thing. It would be I would feel uncomfortable with saying a student's name in the practice and then having it on my on demand. Or having someone else's if someone turns their sorry, I'll step back a sec. I use Zoom currently, and there is an option where you can record all screens or one screen. I have it set up so that you just see the speaker screen because you can't have it, at least as of yet, you can't have it that you can only record the host screen because when someone turns their camera or their mic on, they will be the highlighted one. So I let people, especially new people, know that they're welcome to ask questions during the practice. That might mean they'll be in the recording, which I won't send out without their permission. But I will give space after or invite questions after practice or the next time. So just be like really clear with all of that stuff with your students because it feels way less icky if like, okay, I'm going to be on recording, I'm going to ask a question and I know for sure they're not going to use it for like their on demand or for promotional purposes. Then there's more trust built there. You want your students to trust you and you trust them to make the decisions they need to for themselves, right? So let's see. What other important parts are there? I think that's the most. No, sorry. Okay. There's another one. Sometimes if you're used to teaching in a studio that has lots of props, sometimes it can be kind of tricky when you start to teach online to know like, okay, what can they actually use? So in place of a block, you can grab towels and roll them up or blankets. You could use pillows, like throw pillows. Usually throw pillows are a little bit better than like bed pillows because throw pillows are more dense, not as squishy. However, bed pillows too. Honestly, restorative practices with throw pillows and bed pillows and blankets, so good. So instead of a strap, you could use a belt. You could use a piece of rope. Sometimes people have rope around. You could use a dog leash or a towel, depending on what it is. Um, for weights, you can use cans, you can use water bottles, you can fill grocery bags with groceries, like reusable grocery bags with groceries, and use those. I've had people use their cat or their children in a safe way where you're like lifting them over your head or you're like lifting them towards you, you use your common sense. But you know what I mean? Like you can get creative with the stuff you have around you. So I actually find that part of it really cool of getting really creative with what people have, because I think there's this push towards like overconsumption and having all of the things. And I don't think that's really feasible or sustainable. And also you have stuff to use anyway. I mean, if you want to get the props, get the props. I'm not saying don't do that, but I also don't want anyone to come to my class and feel like they have to buy all these things, right? It's not very accessible. So get kind of creative. And if you have people, if that you need props at the beginning, say it at the beginning so they can go around their house and grab them. And potentially name an alternative so that if someone forgot to go get them or if someone doesn't have them, they can also be included in the practice. If you're in a studio, I know I've like in the past, walked around and given everyone a block if I'm going to use something that needs a block. We can't really do that when we're teaching online. What we can do is invite an option where you don't need to use it. Then they can be included too. Okay. I'm sure there's other parts about teaching online. Oh, sometimes people will leave without saying anything in the middle of practice. Often it's like their phone died and they didn't notice because they were super chill. Or, things happen. If we're teaching an in-person class and someone just leaves, like runs out of the room, we might in that situation go check just to see if they're okay. Just for safety reasons. I will often send a message after practice and just sort of say like, hey, I just wanted to check that everything is okay. If there's anything that you need to bring, like that you would like to bring with me, if I've, whatever, just like open up a conversation there just in case. It's a little different when it's like online. In person, you can see them leave or you can go out and check. Online, I just like to be the person that starts that, like opens that up, because it can, if something did happen, for example, and that maybe you said something that was really triggering for them, it can be really difficult to start that conversation with you. So if you just say, well, like really openly, just be like, I just want to check in. And then if they do have feedback for you, like thanking them for it, and then letting them know that like how you'll rectify that in the future rather than going down the whole pity party thing. That I think we talked about that in a different episode. But if you want a refresher, let me know. And just like the way that you control the space is going to look different versus in online versus in person. And when I say control the space, I don't mean be controlling. I mean that you can demonstrate to everybody that it's safe and like it's a safe space. Another way you can do that is by having a set of like ground rules that you might send out to new students and having it be really clear what might happen if those rules are broken. So for example, I have I think they're posted on my website. I send them out to students, and if I'm doing a workshop or a training, I will have them as a part of it. And it's that we use inclusive language. We use people's pronouns. We don't assume people's pronouns. If we make a mistake, we apologize. We don't use language that is like it was full of anti-fat bias. We don't give numbers for weights. We don't talk about diets. We don't use homophobic language or racist language, or like I feel like you get it. We use inclusive language, and what it might look like is if there has been a mistake, then we might have a conversation outside of the room. When it happens, say you say, say you use the wrong pronouns for me, for example, I might then correct you and say, oh, actually, my pronouns are they or she. Um, and then hopefully you say, oh, sorry, I'll remember that for next time. And then I can be like, okay, cool. Thank you so much. Um, or if you start to, talk about this like new diet thing you're trying, I might remind you that this space is free of that. And then hopefully again, you'll say, oh, sorry, I totally forgot. I might follow that up with a conversation with you just to kind of underline why we're keeping it an anti-diet space. And then if it continues to happen or if it happens again, having some sort of um, consequence or like next step that shows that I'm enforcing that and I'm really actually keeping it safe for the people in the room. So having those guidelines or the values or ethics or however you want to view them and enforcing them is showing to the other people in the room that you are holding a safe space for them. And this is something that you're doing, and it's communicating to them that you care about their safety. And it's also communicating to the people who might be making these mistakes that it's okay to make mistakes. We're going to work on them together. And if you purposely then go past them, I'm going to cancel your membership and you're not allowed back in without a refund. Like if you are being hateful, if someone comes into the space and is hateful and um using racist language or like very hate speech language, I will cancel their membership effective immediately. If there is a sense that maybe they don't know what they're saying, maybe I will have a conversation. But if there's hate for the sake of hate, I will be deleted. I will not let that back in my space. I have very firm boundaries with that. And I think that online can sometimes feel like a pretty tricky space for folks because some folks, I don't know, because if they don't have their camera on, they feel a little bit extra um, courageous to say the shitty things they might want to say. But it's super important um, to really hold that space, hold that boundary for the people that are in your class, in person or online, both. Um, Again, it's just a little bit different online versus in person, right? And I will say, I haven't had this. I've only had maybe one or two issues, and both of them were super, super mild and very, like, very easy to deal with. Of the 4 years I've been teaching, so I'm not trying to freak you out. Just to like think these things through because even having that policy outlined can feel really helpful for the people in your space. They're like, oh, okay, I know that Billy is a safe person to be around or to be in the class because I know that they're really enforcing these boundaries so that I can feel safe. Um, yeah. And when I say, I just want to be clear, when I'm saying diet talk, I'm meaning like if you're coming into my space and being pro diet, like talking about, oh, like, oh my gosh, I just did this thing and I'm like losing this weight. No, no, nope, nope. That's not allowed in my space. If you're talking like, oh, I used to think this when I was in diet culture, like I used to think that I had to move my body for an hour a day or whatever, like processing that stuff is different. And any of the stuff is going to be different if it's one-on-one, right? This stuff's going to be different. Um, Is that all the stuff? There's probably more for sure, but let's talk about some of the other details that are close in proximity. We'll talk about equipment and stuff like that setup, and then I'll also talk about transitioning back to in person. So, in terms of equipment, as I said, I still use Zoom. It integrates with Offering Tree, which is the host for my website. There's all my on-demand stuff is up there because of Offering Tree. I currently have it set up so that if you're in the Rebel Movement Club, which is like my group movement classes, it's like the membership for the group movement classes. There we go. If you sign up for like, say, the Tuesday 8 a.m. Connect and De-Stress yoga class, you sign up for that, and then Offering Tree. So I will set up the class so that the link for the class will be automatically made for me. And then I put text like join the class. And then you get the link because Offering Tree will just automatically set it up. I can go in and change the emails and what they look like so that I can make sure I, let you know what to bring, or um answer any questions or whatever in there. But it's set up to automatically happen. So I think it's set up an hour before or the day before, depending on the time of the class. It'll automatically go out. I don't really do anything except for set up the class the first time, and that's it. And then let's see. When I first started teaching, I just used, like, teaching online, I just used my headphones. Actually, no. When I first started teaching, I didn't use a mic at all. I just used my phone. And I used the tripod. Actually, no. Oh my God, I didn't even use a tripod when I started. I just set it up. I had a TV stand and a couple of books and um whatever. I'd set it up so that I could set my phone there and it wouldn't fall off and you could see me, and didn't even use a mic. You don't really need anything except to be able to use Zoom or whatever host you use. And you don't even need a website really. You can just do it, like send out emails and use Zoom, like send out the emails yourself and use Zoom. And um, don't even need a tripod. I would say it is definitely worth it to buy a tripod if you can and when you can, but you don't really need it as long as you can get creative with the stuff you have in your house. Um, Tripod is definitely easier for me because there was a few times that my cat knocked down the phone, or a couple of times where like the chatting at the beginning or the end, like um I would need to like press the like a react button or let someone in, and it would knock over the phone, which is not always the most relaxing. I think one time it fell down in the middle of the final resting pose, which again, not the most chill end to the class, but again, you don't really need it. It just might be nice eventually. And then I used headphones eventually. I do not have a Apple phone. So I know people have used AirPods and found them really good. I've never owned them, and but I have used a couple of different pairs of headphones and they've all been fine. You might check the reviews of them or just kind of check the specs when you buy them. You might even just do a test phone call or a test Zoom call with them on. Some work better than others. I definitely have a pair of like really cheap earbuds that do not work at all. They're awful for my mic, but I can hear fine with them. And I have a cheap pair of headphones that I will use sometimes in like a one-on-one setting. Um, that I can't use like outside or anything because you won't be able to hear me, but it works fine in the space that I have. So test from a couple of different spaces. Um, you don't necessarily need a ring light. They can be helpful. You can also use lamps, whatever you have around you. It can be helpful to have light in more than one spot. So usually, currently my setup is I have a light to the left and to the right in front of me, and then I have my ring light in the middle. And that's kind of like getting rid of shadows from different angles. Um, Play around a little bit with the lighting if you have the option to. So you can just put in a test Zoom meeting if you have your phone. And like that's what I use, by the way, for the camera is I just use my phone. I still use my phone. I've used that since I first started. You do a test call, your phone, and then maybe someone else's phone or someone else's laptop. If you have a laptop, you could just do it yourself, but just make sure you mute because it's otherwise it does this like sound, which is annoying. And then just have someone stand there or put like I don't know, I can't think of something else, like a mannequin, but who has mannequins in their house? And move the light around and see how it looks for you. Or you could do a recording of yourself, like move the light, stand where you might teach, move the light, stand where you might teach, you know what I mean? And then you can go back and look at it and recognize what it looks like. Check all the Zoom settings. There's a whole bunch of different settings in there that you might want to take a look at in terms of what the mic filters out. I usually just do the the automatic one. However, if you're a person that likes to add instruments, like sound bowls, what are those called? Or any music instruments, There is an option for the sound on there that you have to click. Otherwise, you can't hear it. Like your students won't be able to hear it unless you go in and click this one for musicians. It will say musicians on it or instruments or whatever. It makes it very clear. You can also go in and change the quality of the recording or quality of the picture. It will compress the quality for the recording naturally. The only way to get them to not compress that is to spend like hundreds of dollars, which who can afford. So if you have this space, if you're going to be doing like YouTube videos or something, you might want to just record it onto if you save it onto your computer or your phone rather than the cloud, it will be better quality. Or you could just use your camera on your phone. But that's the way to go around that. Which I only learned that one last month. I did not know this whole time. Um, what else? Yeah, so I started to use my headphones shortly after I started to teach online. Um, they've since broken. I've got a lot of use out of them. Now I use the Rode Wireless Me mic for classes where I'm recording them. The one thing with that is that you can't hear, if you're using your phone, you can't hear students. So you might make it clear at the beginning that you won't be able to hear their questions, and maybe they send in a chat, or at the very end of the practice, unplug your mic and turn it off so that you're just using your phone mic so that they can ask questions there, or that get them to send you a message some other way. Just make it clear so that they don't think you're ignoring them. I've had it like very rare times when people have asked me questions in class, but I try really hard to make sure that they know that they can ask me after or before, because that's important. Um, so the one thing I will say with the Rode Wireless Me is um, if you're using it with your phone, there's a very particular cord setup, which took me a while to figure out, and I'm grateful that I had someone to help me, and I can't remember their name right now. I think their name's Ashley. They have YouTube videos about it, but there's like a red coily one. I don't know any of the names of the cords, and so I won't even go there. You would think I know because I'm studied music and I talked about all these chords, but I don't remember. Um, I'll just say if you do get the Rode Wireless Me, you can send me a message and I will tell you my cable setup and I will show it to you, because I spent forever being really confused about it. Nothing was working. I almost returned it, and then thankfully someone helped me to figure it out, and now it works fine. I just have to get it to work on my computer. That's the next step, because so far I haven't been able to, which is partially why some of the previous podcasts had a slightly different sound than ones by myself. Um, yeah, that's what I have online. Oh, I will say, if you're looking for a platform for your online yoga studio, and you're looking for one that can host on demand, that you can write newsletters in, that you can um, schedule your classes, not have to send a million emails, you can use my code, because I use Offering Tree. I have a referral code in the links in the show notes, and with that, you can get a discount off of your, like, whatever you pay for whatever it's called, your subscription to Offering Tree. So check that out if you're interested in the show notes. And then the other thing I'll say is that in terms of going back to online or in person after teaching online, it feels a little bit weird, I think, for all of us to be in a room with other people moving. And it's just a very personal thing. Like, the conversation, as I said at the beginning, about hands-on is a super important one. And if, like, you have decided, if you're not comfortable doing hands-on, don't do them. It's fine. It's not needed at all. Um, if you are doing hands-on, make sure you have a very in-depth, like, have a conversation where there's like very much a place that someone can consent multiple times throughout, and make it like, if you're asking someone like in the class, don't say it like out loud, like for the whole class to hear, like, "Hey, Billy, can I give you a hands-on?" Like, that's uncomfortable, but you might go up to them and just loudly enough that they can hear, be like, "Hey, is it okay if I do this?" And then walk away if they say no. You know what I mean? Um, Otherwise, it can be kind of tricky sometimes to go back to um, teaching in person and knowing how to then because it's not going to be the same as it was before, right? Like if you taught in person before, it's not necessarily going to feel the same as it does now. And it really depends on the space. So I've taught in some spaces since in person where the people still really want me to show them what they're doing. And I can tell because people are just watching me and they will follow whatever I do. So if I come out of a posture and like go to walk around the room, they will come out of the posture too. And so in that, what if I notice that, then I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to keep doing the postures with them. Um, and it might just be like the case of building up trust. If you have the same people in class every week, it might be like, okay, I'm going to like, I'm not going to do this whole practice. I'll walk you through it. And if you have questions, let me know, and kind of naming that too, whether you're online or in person. If you're not doing the practice, let them know you're not doing it. And say like, I'll do my best to talk you through it. If you're confused, let me know, or just kind of like do your own thing. Yeah, just kind of being okay with the fact that it might have a different vibe to it, and maybe it doesn't. Maybe it feels the exact same. And that part of it really like is a very personal one. The culture is different studio to studio, city to city. So what my experience has been might not be yours, and maybe you find people really like when you don't do the practice, or maybe you really like teaching while you're doing the practice. Maybe you never practice while you teach, and that's also great. There's no wrong way to do that. If you have any specific questions about teaching online or going back to teaching in person after teaching online, let me know. If you need any more details about my setup, or if you have any like things where you're like, oh my gosh, this just happened in my class, like how do I deal with this, or anything like that, send me a message, info@movewithbilly.com. I'm happy to help you out. I also do mentor teachers as well. So if you are a person that you're like wanting to start your own online business for like an online studio or in-person studio or whatever you're trying to start to teach, we can work together. I can be your mentor and we can have all these conversations that you want. I love doing this work, so I'm really stoked. If you want to connect, info@movewithbilly.com. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok @movewithbilly, and LinkedIn, but I think it's Billy Smith. I just got LinkedIn and I don't know how to tell you how to do that. If you want to chat with me though, email or Instagram is the best place. If you could take a second, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. Share it if you found it helpful. Tag me if you share it in your social media stories. Check out the links below if you want that discount on Offering Tree, and if you want to join me in September for my anti-diet teaching workshop. I'm so stoked about that. Thanks for listening. I will talk to you next week. Bye.